I listened to a Sam Harris podcast yesterday. The guest was Megan Phelps-Roper. She's a young woman who was raised in the Westboro Baptist Church. Remember them? That's the group of about 80 people who showed up at soldiers' funerals with signs saying that God wanted dead soldiers. Their most famous sign read, "God hates f***s." I'd heard her mentioned by Joe Rogan, but I'd never heard her story. It's a fascinating one. Her grandfather was Fred Phelps. She was raised inside the church and by age 5 was carrying similar hate-filled placards. I didn't know what to expect. What struck me most was how intelligent, thoughtful, and just normal Megan Phelps comes across. I won't tell the whole story, but I'll link to a couple of her interviews below. Suffice it to say that she grew up in a cult that had come to a bunch of hardline conclusions by studying a book that has made millions of other people kinder and less judgmental. Fred Phelps's interpretation of Scripture sent them on a mission, and that's why they were constantly protesting events, causing trouble, and inflicting pain on grieving people. Mrs. Phelps-Roper tries her best to explain it. The bottom line is that the group became convinced that homosexuality meant damnation. They were trying to save the souls of all who practiced it or supported it. At first, their mission was to help people, to prevent their descent into hell. But due to the obsessive nature of their leader and their isolation from others who might have balanced out their fervor, the group became ever more harsh, ever more willing to create outrage in the name of getting their message to a wider audience. Her aha moment came when she began to see the ever wider gap between the words and actions of Jesus and the outright cruelty of Westboro's approach. As I hiked and listened to the interview, one thing kept playing around the edges of my mind, that this is exactly the same sort of obsession that has distorted the oh-so-compassionate Democratic Party into basically a hate group. If you've listened to many of my videos, you've heard me say that the left is run by change junkies and control freaks. The proliferation of these two personality types has caused the Democratic Party to become manic about enforcing the oppression orthodoxy. The change junkies and control freaks simply cannot allow dissent. They see any normal level of skepticism as a lapse of faith. It sends them into inquisitor mode. Groups like Antifa are just democratic extremists hunting for heretics. When I was just out of school and a Democrat by default, I didn't see the parties as all that widely divided. Both seemed to sincerely love this country and to genuinely want the best outcomes for its citizens. The differences were in strategy. The Republicans had almost a faith-like belief that if left alone, Americans would figure things out for themselves. That government interference with culture and economics was to be used only very sparingly. Democrats, on the other hand, saw government as the primary tool to create the sort of world they envisioned. Their faith was in legislation and enforcement. This is a demonstrably ineffective approach to changing minds. The Democrats themselves prove that by constantly telling us that the country is still chock full of racists, sexists, and homophobes. It's clear to them that their aggressive proselytizing hasn't worked, yet they continue to ramp it up. Over time, the natural selection processes going on in the schools and universities and media favored those who were most passionate, who made the most noise, who never gave up, who would spend the week making signs and pour into the streets every weekend demanding action. The key positions in all of these areas were taken over gradually by control freaks and change junkies. These people dropped the moniker of liberal and adopted the label of progressive, and rightly so, because their philosophy is now not the least bit liberal. It is now as harsh and demanding as any fundamentalist religion. What Fred Phelps was preaching seemed so far removed from liberalism that I doubt many ever looked into his own political history. But as I heard his granddaughter telling his story, a suspicion began to grow in my mind. The whole devotion to street protesting is just not something you see on the right. And sure enough, when I got home, I looked it up. Phelps was a lifelong Democrat. He had started public life as a civil rights attorney, but his attraction to hardline religiosity had bent his crusader's nature into a very different direction. My point is that the hard wiring of Phelps's brain was similar to that of a modern progressive Democrat. His desire for shame-based, top-down cultural change is not at all different from, say, a Rashida Tlaib. You've seen the video of her protesting a gathering of Trump supporters. She was so outraged that she ended up being expelled while screaming that they were all crazy. This is the picture of a person who attaches to an ideology that they feel morally validates their inner need to control others. They seem to be pushing new ideas, but what they are really doing is satisfying an inner need to be in charge. Fred Phelps began his pastoral life as a traveling preacher. I'm sure that every morning when he woke up, his mind was focused on spreading the news of salvation. But as his following grew, his inner control freak woke up, and that led him to ever more demanding and absolute doctrines. Sin and Satan were the enemies, but over time, as Megan Phelps-Roper explains, the people he originally sought to rescue became the target of his hatred. This is what has happened to Democrats, where once they hoped to enlighten those they felt were captive to outmoded ideas, now they seek to destroy them, along with everything that gives them comfort. On my epic journey in 2017, I found myself in Topeka, Kansas. I hadn't been thinking about Fred Phelps or Democrats or any sort of coercive protester. I was just having breakfast in a cafe, but before I hit the road, I Googled Topeka landmarks and Westboro Baptist Church popped up. So I drove over there and walked around a little. It's a peaceful little Midwestern neighborhood. There wasn't a soul in sight on the corner of 12th and Churchill. I was amused to see that the corner house directly across the street had been painted like a rainbow and turned into a sort of anti-hate center. I had no clue that 2 years later I would hear Phelps's granddaughter tell an anecdote that works like a plot twist at the end of his story. You see, toward the end of his life, Fred Phelps had softened. He was ailing and frail. One day he walked out onto the lawn into the shadow of his church and spoke to the neighbors in the Rainbow House. Family members heard him say that he thought they were good people, that he held no ill will toward them. Did those words cause a ripple of doubt to spread through his congregation? No. In fact, his disciples, including his own immediate family, excommunicated him. So addicted were they to the hatred that they turned on their leader because he had begun to think he'd taken a wrong turn. If Nancy Pelosi was to suddenly say, "Wait, fellow Democrats, we've gotten way off track here. Let's try to be nicer. Let's try to work constructively with the president and all Republicans," she would be torn to pieces by her own constituents. To this day, Megan's mother and aunts and cousins act as if she's dead. They believe she's doomed to hell, and they grieve for her. She reminds me a little bit of another young woman. Tulsi Gabbard is no conservative, but she's realizing that what attracted her to the Democrats has been replaced by something much darker. I'm hopeful that more of her kind will arrive and begin to guide her party out of the grip of the control freaks and into something more moderate. If that happens, perhaps our own party will respond in kind. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.